Hello, and welcome back to the Follow Your Spark podcast. I am so excited for the conversation that we are about to have today and to introduce you to this beautiful human sitting across the virtual screen from me. Halsey Payne is someone who I met through the Ecstatic Dance community. And even though we don't know each other well, and I haven't had the gift of experiencing one of his events yet, I have heard incredible things about you and the container and the space that you hold. And I'm just so excited to hear more of your story, especially about the work that you do in supporting others in their recovery journey. And I really admire your vulnerability and openness in sharing your own story in YouTube and otherwise, and really inspired by your commitment to service in your professional work and helping others with substance use disorder. So thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you, Gina. It's an honor to be a part of this, and I'm excited for our conversation.
Beautiful. I always love to start these interviews by asking people, what, if anything, comes to mind when you hear that phrase, to follow your spark? Does it make you think of anything?
So it immediately resonated with me, and actually, speaking on substance use disorder and my own recovery journey. So for many years, I wanted to stop using drugs and I was unable to do it on my own. And then at the end of the road for me, when it got really bad, and I knew I was about to go into treatment. Like, I finally admitted that I couldn't do this on my own and I needed to ask for help, which took a long time for me to admit to myself. I'd be getting high in my room, knew I was going to treatment soon, getting high in my room and writing. Like, the one thing I would not sell or get rid of was my computer, because I would write all the time. And I was obsessed with this idea that I had this little speck of light that would never go away. Even when I was like in the depths and completely run and controlled by my disease and being enslaved to it, I always could feel this little and see it, this little white tiny speck that nothing could get rid of that. And I started to notice that it was starting to build up and grow back to being more than like the tiny little speck that it was. So I think at that spark, I've thought of that immediately when I saw that your podcast was called Follow Your Spark, because ever since then it's taken a lot of tending to, and it's built up and then it's dwindled down, but it's always been like a constant fanning, or even sometimes slowing it down, stop fanning it, and keeping the balance to it. It just makes me think of tending to a fire, which in alchemy and tarot, I think of fire, and it means spirituality, creativity, and like the soul, the human soul. It's something that takes a responsibility to tend to, and it takes effort. Yeah.
Yeah, I love that. What a powerful metaphor. That fire is that representation of the spirit, your creativity, your soul. And
Mm-hmm.
it sounds like when you were in the depths of low points in your life and your journey, like just holding on to and connecting to that, there was something that you knew that was there and that fire couldn't go out. And you had the responsibility and the ability to tend to that fire more.
Yeah.
And I'm curious, it was a question that I was thinking about even before we jumped on the phone. I would love to know, what was the tipping point? You talked a little bit about there was something that's okay, I have to get help. Was there a moment, or was there something that really was the catalyst for you in your journey?
Sure. I mean, it's hard to, okay, so I'll say this. It started a long time before that, in recognizing, like, when I was 18 years old, the first time I used a hard drug, quote unquote, I recognized, oh, I'm an addict. If this is around, if I have access to it, I cannot stop. I have no say. It's not my willpower that's going to save me from this. I didn't have it in those words, but I recognized that. But that didn't mean I wasn't still in denial. Throughout the years, I kept being like, okay, I just need to, only use this type of substance, or I just need to do it on the weekend or whatever. And I just kept ending up in this cycle of the same place. I thought a relationship with the right woman would save me. I thought the right job would save me. I thought moving to a new living situation would save me. But I just kept ending up in the same place, which is in my room, alone, screening people's calls that cared about me, just wanting to be left alone and too afraid to engage with life. Like, just the fear was overwhelming. And I ended up moving into Baltimore, moving out of my mom's place. I moved back with my mom for a little bit. She has substance use disorder issues as well. I took her to treatment, actually, when, like, on the way to moving to Baltimore. And then I went to Baltimore and went from like a kind of okay phase to going completely like a freight train down towards my like rock bottom. And it had never gotten that bad before. I was surrounded by it. I was in a pretty bad neighborhood where I was living in Baltimore. My neighbor sold the drugs that I like to use. He was always there. I was unemployable. And my roommate, who was my best friend when we moved in together, he was a 3-time Iraq War veteran in the Marine Corps. He had hardcore PTSD. And once he started using those drugs, he turned into a completely different person. He turned into an animal. You know, like he was a monster and he was stealing from me all the time. He was twice my size. He was a, trained killer. There's nothing I could, if you wanted to steal from me, there was nothing I could do about it, And I remember I was desperate and I went to my mom's house on Thanksgiving actually. And she had 6 months sober at this point, and her apartment was renovated. She had all these friends I didn't recognize. And she went from, you don't understand, I don't know, like anybody who has ever experienced somebody who's in severe alcoholism, it's like witnessing somebody being possessed by a demon. Like she was like speaking in tongues type of stuff. Like it was bad. So I went from moving her in and then 6 months, like taking her to treatment, 6 months later, seeing her on Thanksgiving, having a renovated apartment, being smiley and happy to see me, feeding me and everything. And her friends asked me, I wasn't going to insult them and tell them I was doing okay. I was like 120 pounds, soaking wet, completely lost and desperate. And I didn't lie to them. I'm near homelessness. I'll just go ahead and say it. I'm smoking crack and I'm doing heroin every day. This is where I'm at. At this point, I wasn't hiding anything. I was desperate. I think I was just to the point of, they call it in recovery, the gift of desperation. I had that gift was there, and they just at the right time, God's will for me. She got sober and she had friends. And I remember this man, he's still sober to this day. He had like maybe a couple months sober, and he asked me, "You ever think about going to treatment?" And I was like, you know what, at this point, yes. And he just like kind of nodded his head and he said, okay. And then we just went back to eating. And this gets me like a little, I still feel it. Like that, like living in Baltimore as a really hardcore drug addict and living in that life, and that it's everything, all the people you come into contact with, it's like the underworld, And when you are in that state, you are treated like an animal all the time. Like your humanity is gone. So being treated like a man, like a human being to this person, it was the first time I had experienced it in months. And him saying that and not forcing, you got to go to treatment or you're going to die. You don't understand, like he didn't try to preach at me. He just planted a seed and then treated me like a human being. And then, like a few weeks later, I was like, all right, I'm ready. I'm ready. So, yeah.
Wow. Thank you for your vulnerability and your honesty and sharing that moment of your journey. And what I'm hearing is being able to see both extremes. You were present to the extreme of your roommate and seeing that journey that was really hard and challenging. And then you saw the other side of the pendulum of your mom having this really incredible recovery in 6 months and seeing like the stark differences and impact in her own life of, wow, like
Yeah.
my mom can do this. And like, look at these people and, being surrounded by that. And like you said, having even one person treat you like a human being and treat you differently than what you were surrounded by in your neighborhood, in your environment. It sounds like that had a really profound impact.
Absolutely. Something that they say, it's actually one of our traditions in the 12-step recovery stuff. Like any of the 12-step ones usually have 12 traditions as well. And the traditions is how you handle how you compose yourself in the community. And one of them is that we do attraction rather than promotion. So that has many implications, but in the personal implication and how it applies to this guy didn't promote, 12-step recovery to me. He didn't say you have to do this. He just, I could see the freedom he had, and that was attractive to me. And that substance use disorder has a specific type of archetype that a lot of people share. Not all the time, it's generalities, but it's very common that if you try to tell us what to do, especially when we're still sick, or you try to be an authority on us, it usually doesn't work very well. But if you make something attractive and we just have that little spark of like light that's attractive to us, where it's our decision to move towards it, then it's way more likely to work, And that's exactly what happened. Yeah.
Interesting. So I had a question that I was going to ask you, but based off of what you just said, I was like, how could I change this question? So the question that I was going to ask you was, for someone listening to this, if they are in the throes of substance use disorder or even anything that they're dealing
Yeah.
with that feels really challenging, like they couldn't possibly come out of this situation, that maybe they have this identity of this is who I am, I've tried to change before, it's impossible. What would you tell them? And not as like an authority that this is what they have to do, but if is there anything from your own journey or just that's on your heart right now that you'd want to speak to them?
I'm sure you've noticed, I am proud of the fact I'm in recovery, and I'm somewhat loud about it. Somewhat. Where I'm going to say on social media, on Instagram, like when I get 3 years clean, I'm going to say it. And I've had a bunch of friends from my past life, so to speak, reach out to me on social media and be like, what's the secret, And sometimes it makes me feel a little impotent, because I don't have a secret meditation to give you or a certain set of prayers that are gonna get you out of this. The only thing that has ever worked for me, because I tried for years, like all throughout my 20s, I was so sick of drug use. I kept trying and failing and trying and failing. It just never got better. And I tried to prioritize wellness and blah, 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 and spirituality. And the only thing that ever helped me was a 12-step recovery structure and the program to follow and the step work and the fellowship that it offers. However, I will add that I understand to a general degree that first of all, I know this for a fact, that is not the road for everybody. I used to think it was when I was younger and more naive and more excited about this, and kind of proselytized a little bit more about it. I used to be the 12-step evangelist on social media. I've kind of matured out of that. I understand now that a big part of it is community. Big part of it is having support and people that are able to relate to me directly on this direct thing. So that means I don't think you can suffer it alone or hide it from anybody and ever get better. I truly believe that. I could be wrong. I'm sure there's exceptions to that. But I was never able to hide getting sober and for it to stick. It never worked for me. I had to have people know where I was at and know what I was going through that were willing and able to support me through it. The other thing is to have some sort of plan for healing that you can fall back on. To me, that's the 12 steps. To someone else, that might look like following a specific path in Buddhism, maybe following a specific type of spirituality that has actionable steps, not just concepts for you to think about, but things that you can fall back on. So it still happens to me this day. Like I can kind of fall into old ways of addiction without using, like playing too many video games or eating poorly. Or just, for me, last year, a big one for me was love addiction and romance addiction. And anytime I would kind of stray a little bit off the path, I could fall back and be like, oh, let me pick up my step work. This is me, something to write on. So having something like some framework to fall back into when things get wonky. And I think you can find that in many different ways. So support system and people that love and care about you, and some kind of framework for you to heal through. And that can be therapy as well, I'm sure.
Beautiful. And it sounds like when you were at the Thanksgiving dinner with your mom and all of her friends, like you said, you chose to be honest and you felt like you couldn't hide it anyways. And it was just like, this is what's going on. This is the legit, real of what I'm experiencing right now. And someone was able to offer you support and possibility without forcing anything and really just treating you like a human being. Yeah. And I'm just hearing like the power of one conversation. And maybe that wasn't everything, but just like that one conversation can make a really profound difference in someone's life.
Yeah.
And one of the biggest reasons why I wanted to interview people like you and the other people on this season is to share examples of that impact, because I feel like I've experienced this feeling within myself and I can see it in other people in my community. Sometimes when the world feels like it is falling apart, this thought of what could I possibly do? What difference could I possibly make when there's such huge, terrible things going on in the world? So I'm curious if you have anything to share or speak to about that, of someone who's like throwing their hands up in the air. It's like, I can't do anything. I'm one person. Why should I even bother?
I love this question. First of all, I want to add one last thing before we move on to answering this question. One thing that can be a common trap for people is minimizing our addiction. So if it's only a certain type of substance, then they don't think that it warrants taking that big of a step. And I think that is a thing that can keep people stuck in a real cycle for a long time. So I just wanted to add that whatever your problem looks like, if it's causing you pain, it doesn't matter the circumstances. The pain is the same and it needs to be addressed the same. So I just wanted to add that little bit in there. So the other question, I love that question so much because that is something that I've had to tend to and tend with for myself so much. You know, are you into numerology at all?
A little bit.
In my numerology, I don't remember all of them, but if you get a full one going down, there's 6 numbers or 5 numbers that are given to you based off your birthday and your name and all of the letters and everything. So all of mine are number 9. Every single one is 9. And number 9, what I've come to understand about it is about imagination, and a specific thing about it is idealism and being a humanitarian. I feel kind of what God put into me karmically in this life was I just care about all of humanity all the time. And a lot of the times that I suffer through something or I'm experiencing grief for any reason whatsoever, I come back to feeling that world grief. Come back to feeling like there's so much pain in this world. There's so much pain in the human experience. And it's like a sweet sorrow for me because I feel it very deeply and I feel God there. And I always come back to, but why? God, you know, like, why? Please make it better for us, make it easier. And I still have to tend with that. And what I've come to recognize for me was I think the true essence of the best way to be of service is to recognize your own passion, to recognize the drive that is within you that helps others, and to give yourself to that fully. And recognize that, no, I cannot change the military industrial complex. That's not the drive I have to become an activist or a politician to try to change the system from the inside. I'm not going to get political, but I don't believe that's how it's going to change. I believe it's going to change through human evolution. I believe it's going to change through every individual taking the responsibility of the shadow of humanity upon themselves. Because when one of the philosophies, my own personal philosophy that's come to tending with this question is, what is the shadow in humanity that bothers me the most? The one that brings me the most sorrow and anger and resentment, and looking for where that shadow exists inside of me. So how does it manifest in me? And what do I do with that inside of me? Because that is the only thing I will ever have control over, you know, truly. So that's I think the way, you know.
Yeah. And I feel, different teachers, spiritual leaders, etc., kind of say, be the change you want to see in the world kind of thing. And I feel like sometimes people can think of that as cliche or it's not enough. But that can be really hard to be the change that you want to see in the world, of like not judge your neighbor or like all these things that we want to see happen on a global scale. And yet we're not even willing to do them within our own lives, within our own communities.
Yes.
So what you spoke to reminds me of that, of just as minuscule as it might feel on a global scale, to be able to trust that there is power in that. There is power in one person, and one person can impact another person who can impact another person. And we can create that energy that we want to live in, one change at a time, by being willing to see our own shadow and heal our own shadow that we see reflected, in the macro.
And what this makes me think, it's before we started the podcast, we, had a little tiny conversation, and I said water seeks its own level, and you were talking about how these conversations overlap and stuff like that, and the synchronicity. So what you just said, exactly what you just said, my sponsor just shared it. He just celebrated 11 years in our 12-step fellowship. And he said when he first got into treatment, like when he first got to a recovery house, when he was like, 30 days clean or something like that, he said a woman said to him, and it stuck with him it's still with him to this day, that one candle can light 1,000. And like when he said that, we've been quoting it ever since, because that's exactly right. What you're saying, by me recognizing, and I've had to tend with this a lot lately, recognizing that, first of all, there's a lot of frustration in my line of work with people who are not ready, with people who are particularly sick and struggling, and it can take a toll sometimes. And I see a lot of the times people do not complete the program. A lot of the times people leave the program and end up using it again, and I see them again, 6 months later or something like that. But I have seen successes. And those successes means that is one more person that is able to do good in the world. And that means how many people they can help. So each and every time there's some kind of like coalescence of one person getting better because of what you did, then that means they're taking that whole thing with them to a place, to a part of the world that you have nothing to do with,
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's incredible. And I would imagine, what you talked about a minute ago of being in tune with what are you passionate about, what shadows in humanity upset you the most, and being able to direct your efforts there, and to remember that not all of us have to do everything. We don't all have to be activists. We don't all have to want to impact the system politically or do this or do that. But what I hear again and again from people who are out here on a mission to be of service, it's all about what lights you up or upsets you the most, and being able to let that be enough to give your everything to that cause and do that wholeheartedly, and to let it be enough instead of trying to think you have to change every single cause or fix every single problem going on in the world at the same time.
Yeah, exactly. Because, we have so much access to everything that's happening in the world, and we're so disillusioned with how the world really works on the macrocosmic scale, But I just think about just using you as an example. I don't know anything about feng shui. I don't know anything about it at all. I just thought it's how you set up your room. But you have gotten an understanding of it to be able to help people gain some semblance of real energetic understanding and control in their life, I guess, and because that you found a passion for it and you dedicated yourself to it, you're able to bring that to other people and gift other people the thing that you loved, And when you were just saying that just now, it made me think maybe the thing that frustrates you about the shadow of humanity is exactly tied to the thing you're passionate about. You just have to find the connection between the two,
Yeah. And for me, it was growing up, like I was so consumed by this inner critic mind dialogue, just so consumed by these negative thought spirals, mind drama, all of this stuff. And I was very analytical and always in my brain. And throughout my life, just sought out different practices, tools that help me get out of the endless mind drama and drop into my body or energy, or to be able to connect with my intuition and look at the world from a different perspective. And that, in a variety of ways, brought me to feng shui. And it was that idea, like you said, of I don't want to live like this. And I don't want other people to have to live by this, to be so consumed by this mental inner judge, critic, etc., and be able to live in a different way. So for sure, our passions are connected to the things that trigger us and upset us and everything that you just said.
Yeah.
And I would imagine it's that. And I'm curious if there's anything else. I know you said you've been in this work now that you're doing for 9 months, and I would love to hear a little bit more about that. But what fuels you to dedicate yourself to this work and now serving people in this way?
So it's interesting. When I first, when I was in treatment still back in 2017, 2018, when I was there, I was like, oh, I want to be an addiction counselor. This is what I want to do. And I was so excited about that. And then about a year later, I started going to classes for it. I actually relapsed while I was in school. I still passed both of my classes, but I was like, you know what? I'm already in a 12-step fellowship helping people for free, and they're frustrating already, just like the people I'm trying to be of service of here. I can't imagine this being my job too. So I really didn't expect to ever end up in this line of work. I really didn't. After that, I was like, I did these 2 classes. I don't think I'm going to dedicate any more time to this. And what you were saying, like about your journey with feng shui, it made me think of something my friend Eliza Dolby says. She used to be in the Baltimore community, and she lives up in New Jersey now. She runs this retreat center called the Harmony Mountain House, and she's booked me a couple times to do ecstatic dances there. And she said this thing about like following the trail of breadcrumbs and just trusting the trail of breadcrumbs. So like it made me think of that when you were talking about all of these things you were starting to attend with, and it like if you think about what brought you to feng shui, that line goes really far back. You know, if you really traced it back, it goes really far back. Everything that makes it attractive to you, everything that makes it work is like a medicine for you. And if I followed the trail of breadcrumbs back for me for working with people with substance use disorder, it's the same. I've always cared really deeply for people, and that used to manifest as being controlling and trying to get up in their lives and tell them what to do because I understand what's best for you, even though my life is a fucking mess. You know? So I don't think I was ready. So it's funny, I was actually doing my 8th step in 12-step recovery, and it's made a list of all the persons we had harmed and became willing to make amends to them all. So we list out the people we've done harm to, and we just become willing. That's what the 8th step is. The 9th step is actually making those amends. And one of them was actually to my mom. And I had been depending on her to pay my car insurance and cell phone bill. And I was like, part of my amends to her is I'm going to be fully self-sufficient. I'm 34 at that time. I was like, I have no business having my mom paying any of my bills. This is ridiculous. But part of my fear was like, I'm already struggling for money right now. I was mostly making my money off ecstatic dances and moving jobs every once in a while. I was making enough money to live, but not enough money to save up. And I was like, I couldn't imagine like adding a bill on top of what I already had going on. And my sponsor told me that they were hiring at this place, and they were like, they need part-time work. And I was like, oh sweet, part-time work. So I'm going to work here 2 or 3 times a week. I know I'll make at least a little bit of money to guarantee I'm going to make, and that'll be it. And I started working, and I immediately fell in love with it. And actually, no, I didn't fall in love with it immediately. At first, I was actually milking the clock. You know, I was there because this was a means to an end to me. And I was like really not putting in that much effort. And I did not feel good about that. And I actually got called out on it by my boss. And she's an amazing human being, an amazing boss. And she called me out on it, and she just told me what she's seen. And I immediately realized, man, this is going to mess with my self-esteem. I'm not, like, I have integrity. If I'm going to go somewhere and do something, if I'm going to agree to do a job, I should be giving it my all, or I should quit. If I'm not willing to do that, I shouldn't do it, you know? So I started giving a damn. And shortly after that, she asked me to work full time. And after I started giving a damn, I started loving this job. And then I started working full time, and as it's progressed, I've made a whole bunch of mistakes, and I've learned about my professional boundaries. I've learned also that being a fellow recovering addict, helping a friend that's a recovering addict, is not the same as working as a professional in substance use disorder treatment. It is not the same thing at all. So learning how to put that hat on and recognize that it's 2 different hats. And once that started to click, and I started working on my peer recovery support certification and stuff like that, and like getting training to become better at this job, the more it made me recognize like, oh, God put me here. This was meant to be. Like, this is my medicine, you know? Yeah.
I love that. And that's what following your spark is all about. Yeah. And that's what the heart of what it means to me, that we don't always / ever know what is going to happen in our lives 5 years from now, 10 years from now, etc. But if we are willing to follow just what's the next step that feels aligned, what's the next step that feels like it's calling me, that feels like a yes for me, if we're willing to do that and not know, and be open to the adventure of it, and open to, even if something challenging happens, like somebody calls you out at work, that doesn't have to be a bad thing. That can be a gift on your journey. That's a catalyst for you to step up and transform. And I think sometimes people think that it always is supposed to feel good, like following your spark. It doesn't.
No.
It doesn't always feel good.
It's scary. It's scary. You know, and that's one of the biggest things that has been a part of the journey is developing a new relationship to fear, and recognizing that fear, for me, I'm sure this is like this for most humans. I don't know, but I know for me that if I care about something, it brings me fear. It just does like a lot, especially when I am challenged. I think might just be my karma or something like that. But God wants me to keep challenging myself and progressing. And if I start falling into a groove of doing the easy thing in my life, then I become dissatisfied and it's not enough anymore. And I need to continuously be taking the next step. So that happened to me with ecstatic dance as well. I always do these intentions at ecstatic dance and really put everything into it being super personal thing that I'm sharing. And last year when I was doing them all the time, I started getting the guidance to do a new one and I could never half-ass it. I just couldn't. I wasn't allowed to. By some inner guide, it wasn't allowed to happen, or else it just wouldn't happen. And it kept pushing me to push my creative boundaries of doing something harder, which always meant scarier because I don't know if it's going to work because it's new. And it would bring me so much fear every time. It's funny, I want to shout out Noelle, who I'm sure you know from, what's it called, Sparkle Space, right?
Sparkle Space.
The Sparkle Space. And I've talked to her a lot while she started doing ecstatic dances, and I'm so proud of her, and hers are amazing, amazing. And she goes through the same exact thing. Like when you care a lot about something, and it can cause you crippling fear, and just do it anyways. And every time you will get a new level of freedom from it, and you will level up. It just works like that.
Yeah. I'm curious, for someone who hears that, just feel the fear and do it anyways, but they still feel paralyzed. Is there anything else you might say to them, or anything like, were there moments where you always, okay, I feel the fear, but I'm going to do it anyways? And were there also moments that you felt the fear and didn't do it?
Absolutely.
And like, what made the difference between the doing it anyways and the not doing it?
I'm so glad that you shined a light on that, because people can easily turn to start beating themselves up if they don't. And it's funny because conversation overlap, here we go again. Like, we have this huge July 4th party at my house every year. It's a part of the house that I live in. Like 100 people come. This year we had like bands and karaoke and stuff like that. And this woman that I just met, that just like, she's got a good amount of clean time, but she just moved to our area. And she opened up to me and said that, ever since she got clean, she has stopped performing music, stopped being creative, because it was so tied to her addiction. I was talking to her about it, and I was like, because I brought it up myself. It had nothing to do with her bringing it up, and it was just the right conversation at the right time. And I told her, like, the metaphor I have for it, because I have fallen short a bunch of times, and I have contracted back into myself and back into hiding mode. I have done it, and I've fallen short, and I've heard the challenge come up and not stood tall to it. So sometimes it's a matter of, okay, let's say like the thing you fear that you're supposed to do is an ocean, and you're on the beach. First, dip your toe in, and then do something that's bite-sized. Just move in the slight direction, and then stick half of your foot in, And then sometimes you're like, all right, now it's time for me to, get my whole leg in there. And then you walk up and you're like, and you don't. And sometimes you need to back up a little bit again. And I'm not ready for that. And it's time for me to just dip a toe again. And then sometimes you'll just have growth spurts. And that's life. And that is the journey, is expansion and contraction, And I'm still in that cycle. I don't know if that'll ever go away. I don't know. Because I'm in a bit of a contraction right now too, specifically creatively. I've been taking a step back from doing ecstatic dances lately because I've really felt more drawn to put my all into my career with substance use disorder. I know I'm not leaving ecstatic dance behind, but something that I recognize, and I had a divination about this recently with a wonderful woman, another shout out, Kat Hargreaves. Highly recommend her divinations if you're really about the work. And something that I came to realize through that divination and other conversations in my life was like, I only want to do ecstatic dance if I have something truly personal that I feel needs to be expressed. Trying to keep up like a once a month output like I was doing before, I'm forcing it and it doesn't feel right doing it, and I'm just doing it to do it, instead of having something meaningful that I want to offer to you. And I just recognize, if I don't have something meaningful that I want to offer, then I'm not going to do it. I'm going to wait until it comes,
There's so much in what you said that I could speak to and ask you about. And one thing that I want to highlight is that metaphor of the ocean. And if people are feeling called to do something that feels scary, that you don't have to go from 0 to 100.
Exactly.
And what's the next baby step that maybe you feel like 10 degrees of fear, but not like 1,000 degrees of fear. Can you do that and build your comfort and build your evidence and your
Mm.
capability and your resourcefulness and really take those steps up the ladder one by one? And what's coming to my mind too is like this image of like comparison. And if you're looking at, so say somebody wants to do an ecstatic dance, like maybe they look at you or they look at someone else and they're like, oh my gosh, I'm so far. But
Yeah.
A, who cares? There's no comparison. And to be able to allow yourself to take it at your own pace and to know that you don't get up the ladder by hauling yourself like anyone flying like a leap up a ladder. Like you
Yeah.
just can't. Like you
Yeah.
have to take it one step at a time. So
Mhm.
what's your next step? And allow yourself to take that next step.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it sounds like creativity and kind of doing these things that you said you might feel fear in has been a big catalyst for your growth. And I've had the pleasure of experiencing Noelle's dances and other people's dances and seeing one thing. And I said this to Jade, someone else in the Sparkle Space
Hmm.
community that led this incredible ecstatic dance, and just seeing what it takes for someone to move past that fear and to believe that they have something to offer. And again, it kind of comes back to the impact of one person. Like her dance had a profound impact on me. And had she not said yes to that call and allowed herself to express in that way, she wouldn't have lit my fire and lit all these other fires. And like to come back to that analogy. And yeah, I want to ask you something too, because before we press record, we talked about collaging. And I want to know, like, creativity plays such a big role in my life and my healing and my personal growth. Can you speak a little bit more to what are the creative outlets that are fueling you right now? And what difference has creativity played in your own recovery or healing or personal growth journey?
Absolutely. So, first of all, I want to do a little bit of self-promotion. I have a video about creativity that was the best thing that I've ever put on YouTube that I put a ton of love into, and I highly recommend checking it out. It's on my, I'm sure you'll give links or whatever. But
Yes.
something that I learned through making that last year, especially, I learned this. And we were just talking about this, taking bite-sized chunks. Something my sponsor says all the time is doing the next right thing. He beats it into my head. Do the next right thing, do the next right thing, do the next right thing. So it's like that 1,000 steps ahead. If I just do the next right thing, it's going to get me there. One thing that's like the final boss for me in terms of creativity that I still have fallen short on, and I still am falling short on, is actually producing my own music, because it feels so far away, being able to make the music that I want to make, especially not having any musical background other than DJing. I don't know music theory. I don't know how to play any instrument. What I recognized was that creativity is, and this changed my philosophy on thought, period, that nothing is truly original. That every single thing I've ever offered, every single thing I've ever said, every single thing I've ever helped somebody with or put on a collage or, done in an ecstatic dance is the product of countless people before me. And so I don't think thought belongs to anybody. Like I believe like a creative idea or just an idea in general, whether it's about art or not, it can be creative, whether it's art or not. I believe consciousness and ideas can be like a life form that can kind of come into our brains. And if it finds fertile ground and you're willing to work with it and let it, I believe they all just want to be brought into physical reality. They just, hey, are you the one to bring me into, and then you're like, whoa, this is cool. And, I'll do it later. And then has this ever happened to you where you have this idea and it comes in and then you don't act on it and then somebody else does it like 3 months later or a year later and you're like, I had that idea. It's because it didn't find fertile ground with you. So it went off and found somebody else to do it with, I believe that people put this idea of being creative or I find it so funny when I was interviewing people getting ready for that YouTube video, asking people whose art I love, just asking them about art. And multiple of them were like, oh, I struggle with calling myself an artist. And something in our culture has made the word artist, we've put it on some sort of pedestal, that it's this moving target of what being an artist means. And for everybody, it's different. I don't make money off my art, or I'm not famous because of it. And it's like, all I do is take a bunch of picture books and cut things out and then rearrange them. And now it's a new picture. Hell yeah, I'm going to call myself an artist. Did I sell any? No, I don't care. I loved creating it, you know? Like, and I used to beat myself up because I didn't produce my own music, because I was DJing other people's music and creating something with it. And come to learn that, like, by learning how to DJ and giving myself to that, and learning how to loop and mess with song structure and stuff like that, that like it became a real like form of storytelling, especially when I found ecstatic dance. And that's just music collage. It's still art, you know? It's just music collage. I'm just like overlapping two things to make something completely different. And who else was going to do that? Nobody. Nobody would have done that, because each one of us has a very unique amalgamation of other people's works within us that we're attracted to. And when you like, nobody else could have done that, but you know, so just take it off the pedestal and just let yourself be, you know, the messy artist that maybe even sucks at doing what you want to do at first. Just let it be. You know? Yeah.
What's coming to my mind right now that the word is escaping me, but I think a kaleidoscope, when you like twist it and like different things happen, and it can have the same colors inside or the same, maybe there's like beads or something, but however you twist it is different. And as you said, of that, each of us has this unique tapestry of experience and things that we've been exposed to, and how we recreate that and reformulate it, and what we create and offer to the world, like that's something that is completely unique to you, and no one else will ever be able to recreate. And if you hadn't said yes to that creative spark or that creative idea, that wouldn't exist in the world. The ecstatic dances that you create, no one else could create in the same way. What has been the gift on you to allow yourself the space and freedom to do that?
So something you said earlier about finding more evidence. So like doing little bite-sized chunks and stuff like that, and just working your way up to it. So they talk about spiritual awakenings in recovery a lot. Like that's like what we're going for. The 12th step is having had a spiritual awakening as a result of these steps. We go out and help other people because of it. The biggest spiritual awakening that I can point to that led to being able to do anything creative at all was trust in myself. By gaining enough evidence of me picking something up, doing it, giving up on it, and then picking it back up and recognizing, oh, I'm not going to give up on this. It might take forever to do, but something in me is not going to let me give up on it. That gave me more and more evidence to recognize, like, oh, I am capable of doing hard things. I am capable of doing something when it gives me fear. I'm able to do something even when it scares me away, and I stop and I give up on it. I've never failed until, as long as I never give up on it, I can't fail, you know? So it takes what it takes, you know, and it takes as long as it takes, and let your process be your process, and just trust yourself. And I think a big part of that is exactly what you said, finding that evidence by recognizing, oh, we've been here before. Like I've been afraid before and I still did it. I thought it was over and I picked it back up, and it found out it wasn't over, and I finished the thing. Oh, wow, I can do this, you know?
Yeah. I see this like spiral too. And then I had a conversation with one of my clients of like, growth and healing is not like this linear stair step process. It can be twisting, it can be circular, and sometimes it can feel like, wait, like I'm back at the quote unquote bottom, or like I'm back where I was. But you're never back where you were. You're always evolving and changing and different. And even if it feels like you're struggling with something that was a struggle years ago, you might be handling it in a different way. And to be able to trust that evolution, and trust that even if you drop something or put something down a year ago, that doesn't mean you can't pick it back up. It doesn't mean you're not an artist because you're not selling something or whatever. That to recognize we are all creators, and to enjoy the process versus judging the output or whatever you think you should be at any particular moment in time.
I keep coming back to that visualization of the spiral, because how I've looked at it, and I've said this to clients in substance use disorder, in that work, that addiction and, fill in the blank, depression, whatever the thing is that keeps you contained, is a downward spiral that gets tighter and tighter. However, people tend to choose that because they know what to expect. there's there's a quote from, recovery literature. There's a certain distorted comfort in familiar pain. I know what to expect there. It sucks there, but I know what to expect. The recovery process, or the growth process, like you're talking about, is an upward spiral that goes wider and wider. And and yeah, you'll come back and be like, I thought we already went over this, God. Why are we here again? Come on. But it's at a different angle. You ever heard, I think it's a Chinese proverb or something. I don't remember what it's from. I've heard it before. Again, collaging ideas. The same man never walks into the same river twice. So like when you go back to the river has changed and you have changed, you are not the same. So that wider and wider spiral, it brings fear, because I know what to expect in the tighter loop. In the wider and wider of less loops being in my life, I don't know what is to come next, and learning how to surrender to that is challenging.
Yes.
It really is.
100%. Oh my gosh. I feel like I could talk to you forever. And as we're nearing the end of this conversation, I would love to know, if people were to take one thing out of this, if there was one thing you really wanted people to remember or you wanted to leave them with, what would that be?
One of the things that I've noticed in our time, and this had a little bit to do with our earlier part of our conversation, one of the things that hurts the most that I've noticed a lot of people share is a pretty grim outlook on humanity itself and on human nature. It's just on the blank, the other and their darkness, or, the powers that be, or, the ignorant whatever. And one of the things that I really hope more humans start to develop within themselves is a love for humanity and a faith in humanity and a more idealistic idea of what we can be, and allowing ourselves to be that and projecting that more into the world around us. Because I think that is one of the main things that it's really indicative. When you think of human nature as like a bad thing, or humanity as a bad thing, maybe that has something to say with how you feel about yourself. Maybe not. I don't know. But like, to me, the more I've come to love myself, the more I've been able to love all of us, and accept all of us for the imperfect, beautiful messes that we are, Yeah.
Yeah,
So
I feel like I could talk for a long time about what you just said. And what comes up too is, and sometimes I see this on social media or different people, of like thinking that this is toxic positivity, or, oh, just those spiritual people talking about love and light all the time. That's not going to do anything. And what it makes me think of, again, is what we were talking about earlier in this conversation, of not underestimating the power that each of us can have. And if we can't, like, when we're thinking about, how can I change the world when I can't even, not judge my neighbor or build a relationship with that person or whatever, like, how can we expect there to be more love in the world if we're not willing to give it to ourselves? How could we ask that of anyone else to give to us if we have to start with ourselves? And to, again, not underestimate that, and, to not make it mean that's the end. Like you said, to kind of go back to everything we've been talking about, to also connect to what you're passionate about and how do you want to make an impact in this world? What do you want to do with that love? What does that inspire you to do when you turn up the dial of love for yourself and love of humanity, and letting that fuel your impact in the world, and knowing that it's not too small. Whatever you have to give, however you feel called to serve, that matters.
Yes, exactly. There's no each one teach one. There's no work too small, there really isn't. And the smallest things make the biggest difference. They really do, it ripples out. So that was beautiful.
Thank you for sharing this conversation, and again, giving me more examples and evidence of people sharing their light and shining that in the world and really making a positive difference. So I appreciate you, and I'm grateful for everything that you shared.
Absolutely. You too, Gina. Thank you.
And we will definitely put all the links in the show notes. And is there anything else that you do have coming up that people can either interact with you, whether in the ecstatic dance realm or any other ways that you can support or you want to direct people to?
Absolutely. I'm coming back to starting to do my own ecstatic dances in probably September or October. So just check me out on Instagram and you'll hear about it.
Beautiful. We will put that in the notes. And the last thing I love to ask people is, again, this whole concept of follow your spark, that sometimes it doesn't make sense. Sometimes it's random. Are there any random sparks you've given yourself permission to follow recently? What are they?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah, absolutely. So I recently started my D&D campaign back up. I'm the game master of Dungeons and Dragons, so I'm creating my whole world and creating a story and doing a collaborative storytelling with my friends. That's the spark that I gave myself permission to do. It's like back to my storytelling roots. This is where it all started for me. I'm coming back to it, just being a nerd in my in my living room with my friends. Yeah, so that's the most recent one. I'm so
Love it.
excited.
I have no idea what any of that means, but I hear your passion.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
yeah,
role-playing game where we all play as characters in a fantasy world, It's so fun.
nice. Oh my gosh, sweet. Thank you again for everything. This was an incredible conversation, and I can't wait to share it.
God bless. Thanks, Gina.